Welcome to the podcast, Hot Tracks with Cold Liquids. I'm your host, Max.
And I'm your host, Nick.
And I'm Austin.
In this podcast, we're going to be breaking down some of our favorite albums for you. Every episode, one of us will suggest an album to discuss. We'll go into detail about the history of the group and the album, as well as the things we like and dislike, and everything in between. Every week, we'll be doing a continuous ranking of these albums in order to figure out which one of us has the best taste in music. As we discuss the album, each one of us will be sipping on our favorite beverages, hence, Hot Tracks with Cold Liquids. What are we sipping on today, boys?
I got my orange juice.
I got two liquids. I got this honey chai turmeric vitality tea, and then I also got a nice cold iced water to sip on.
Now, tea, that's more of a hot liquid there. Here to explain.
I already want to break conventions, the first episode.
Okay.
Pushing the boundaries.
Austin's our local rule breaker. I got today Arizona Arnold Palmer, non-sponsor, and yeah. We're coming for you, Arizona. Look out in your inboxes. So this week, Austin, you picked the album. What have you got for us?
Yes. So to start us off, I picked Vampires Weekend's self-debut album. And I think I have a little intro for us. So this is an indie pop album that was first released January 28th, 2008, which is, I think, 14 years ago from this date.
That can't.
Which is...
No. When we get old.
Yeah, very long time ago at this point. So the band Vampire Weekend was formed by a group of Ivy League students who all met at Columbia, the one in New York, not the one in Chicago, in the early 2000s. Their Ivy League pedigree, as well as them all being from large East Coast cities, are some of the most defining factors about the band. This album specifically received quite a bit of critical support at the time. Pitchfork gave it an 8.8, and The Guardian gave it a 4-star, which are both pretty big accolades from those albums. And there's still quite a bit of fervor, I would say, for the album still. Pitchfork readers picked it as the 71st best album of the last 25 years in 2001. So it was 1996 was the cutoff. And Rolling Stones picked it as the 24th best debut album of all time. So big shoes for them to fill. And now it's time for us to rip it apart.
Yeah, I mean I'd say those are pretty good marks for a debut album there.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting history. They actually wrote it and produced it themselves right after their graduation. The frontman and singer Ezra Koenig, he was actually working at Teach for America in New York as the album released. He was a middle school teacher in English. And I believe the drummer was like an archivist. And then apparently he was a cool teacher from what people have said who were his students.
You got the inside
and
scoop.
He took his instruments with him to class. So
Imagine you're just like sitting in class and your middle school English teacher is playing like A-Punk, but it's actually the lead singer. Like,
if my like English teacher in middle school just randomly like had like a platinum album, like I guess I don't know if it was actually platinum, but still.
They went on to win Best Alternative Album later at the Grammys. So Grammy Award winning middle school teacher.
Yeah. I mean, I had some cool teachers, but I don't know.
You mean the band went on to win Like with later albums or this album one?
Yes, Modern Vampires of the City.
Okay, that's what
And
I
I believe also it was either Contra or Father of the Bride. This album was nominated though for a Grammy, but did not win.
Robbed.
I wonder what it lost. What did it lose to?
Now
I don't know.
I kind of want to look.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead and look it up, Nick.
Okay. So I guess I'm looking for like Grammy 2009.
Yeah, I think so.
Raising Sands by Robert Plant and Allison Krauss.
Never heard of it.
Yeah.
Well,
Or hang on,
I'll add that to the
that
list.
album was released in 2008, right? Or
Mhm.
was it in 2007? I don't see
Nope,
it on
2008.
here. Like for album. Anyways. Huh.
Oh, never mind. It was not nominated.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I was not
Oopsies.
seeing it. Should have been though.
Oh, sorry. Already have to issue a retraction on the first episode, the first 5 minutes.
Well, everyone get the hashtag going on Twitter. Cancel Austin. Trying to spread lies. Yeah. So let's just dive right in though. What are some of your guys' favorite parts about the album?
Oh gosh. I love the like drums.
That was my first note. My first note on here is that the percussion is on point. In all caps, I had that written. I'm not a drum person. I don't know a whole lot about the drums, but I mean, the whole album. That is the one thing that is consistent through every song. The drums are just completely on point. I thought the whole album.
Oh yeah. And yeah, same here. I really don't know very much about drums at all, and it's not something I usually pay attention to. But on this album, it like kind of just grabs your attention. Like I remember the first time I heard it, I guess like maybe 3 years ago now. I was realizing like I was listening to I think Walcott, and I'm just like grooving along, walking across campus, and like I'm like man, like the drums on this are just really good.
Yeah, some of the songs that I pointed out in my notes, I thought on Campus, the drums really hook you on that song. Walcott, I definitely mentioned it there too. And Cape Cod Kwasa Kwasa, with the the drums are just really good throughout the whole album.
Yeah, and I don't even know if like I never really noticed any parts that were like technically difficult. Probably, I'm just guessing. It's pretty straight, like eighth note, 16th chord or whatever. Like, but I don't know. It just has like a groove to it. It's really good.
Yeah, there's some pretty good cymbal and hi-hat work throughout the whole song, or throughout the whole album. Generally, I think it gets into a little more technicality, like technical work. But yeah, I don't know that it's like Keith Moon level of like insanity drums, but it's definitely something I picked up on was how good it is though.
Yeah.
Very, very precise, very tight.
Yeah.
My best point for the album is almost like the imagery that is kind of evoked from the lyrics, as well as the instrumentals. It's very weird that an album kind of has like a setting. Like it feels like you're in kind of New England, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. And some of the songs, like right out of the gate, Mansard Roof kind of invokes this setting through kind of like an iconic part of the architecture of the area. And it kind of just gets denser with songs like Campus, Walcott, Cape Cod, Kwasa Kwasa, that directly reference parts of like whether it's kind of New England culture or just name dropping some of the locations, which the band does quite a bit, and I would say is one of the more core parts of their lyrics is the name dropping.
Yes. I actually, yeah, I had like specifically prepared to that. And this is by no means an exhaustive list. I'm sure I forgot stuff because as I was going, I was like, oh my God, I keep forgetting stuff. But I was just kind of like listing how many different countries do they like reference? And I guess I included states too, but they reference India, France, Pakistan, California, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Argentina, Switzerland, New Mexico, England, Jamaica, New York, Massachusetts, Egypt, Connecticut, and New Jersey. Like,
is that just in this song?
no, in the album, and I guess
That's
I was including
albums.
too, like if they were, if it was something that's like specifically from that place too. I was counting that, but yeah, I don't know how many that was, but that seems awful high.
I think it's also interesting. There's a lot of metaphors in this album, and I think it is interesting for an album that's so specifically about a region, northeastern United States. How many references they make, like you said, to so many other countries, to so many like historical events throughout the entire album as well.
Oh yeah, it's cool. It kind of like mirrors the music in that way too, where it's like kind of grounded. It's like indie pop, but you're pulling influence from all across the world, and it gives it that like worldly feeling too. Yeah, it's really, really cool.
To build off of that as well, not just from all around the world, but also musical elements from different time periods as well.
Mhm.
Chamber music is very, very, very influential, and something that I wrote about. What I liked about this album is how many different instruments that they use, and then the way that they kind of invoke that chamber music era through their but with a bit of a poppy twist. You don't see that very often, including those string elements and woodwinds and stuff.
Yeah, and I also kind of, I guess part of it, like this album makes me think of college. I like learned about it when I was an undergrad, but there's something about like the way that it's like in a place but still is drawing from all across the world and all parts of history and stuff that really feels like college. Because I mean, they're just like in campus, they're walking around the campus and there's like the Buddha on the second floor and there's people from all across the world. Yeah, it was just neat. It reminds me of how it felt to be in college.
Yeah, I think it's not just locations and cultures, but also people. There's a lot of like really specific name drops. The Dalai Lama, Peter Gabriel, and like Little John, who actually was like, he did notice that there was a name drop, and he sent the band Crunk Juice, which was his drink.
I mean, that's very on brand for this podcast. Then he sent
Yeah,
perfect.
Maybe we'll have to get some Crunk Juice.
Yeah.
If we ever get like name drops by somebody, we'll send them some signature drink.
Yeah. We'll have to make a concoction.
That'll be like our when we get famous, like we'll have like beets, but it'll be like beet juice.
We can't be sharing all our secrets this early.
Yeah.
You're trying to give away our tycoon tactics here, Nick. That's okay, so what are some of the things that you dislike about this album?
Ooh, I don't know. Should we go there yet? I feel like I still have like things that I like.
But, well, by all means, go.
Okay, yeah, because this is one of my favorites. So, I got stuff to say. I love the guitar lines, like on just like every song, the riffs and stuff.
That's really interesting because one of my only dislikes on this album is I wrote that some of the guitar lines are lacking. So I'm really interested.
Interesting. Okay. I think I see where you're coming from. I guess some of them are like kind of simple, but I don't know. I just like them, and like regardless of whether they were like complex, I like the tone too. Like it's very bright. But some of the guitar licks are like just good and catchy too. I love the one on Cape Cod Kwasa Kwasa. Just gets stuck in my head. I'm trying to think what other ones. Oh, A Punk.
I was gonna say, for me, the only guitar line that stands out to me on this whole album is A Punk. Great guitar line, real simple. It's really catchy, goes really fast, and it's very fun to listen to the whole song generally. Um, the rest of this album, for what stands out to me, like I said, the percussion really stands out to me. The chamber music elements, like the keyboard and the woodwinds, and I think the guitar lines get really buried in this album, and some of them are just straight up not good. I think Bryn, I really dislike that guitar line, and that's one song where they try to put more emphasis on on the guitar, and I don't know, I just don't like it on that song. It's like they're trying to invoke the sound of bagpipe in guitar form, and I think it sounds horrible. um,
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna defend that song because that's one of my least favorite songs. Probably second least, but I'll save my least favorite one for
Yeah.
the later segment.
So
You gotta stick
you
around.
really
for that.
don't. Sorry, you
No, go
don't
ahead.
think the guitar on Walcott stands out right at the bridge where it's just going
Yeah,
hard. You
I like
don't think that stands out. I think that's probably my favorite part of maybe their whole discography.
I'm trying to remember how it went. To me, what I remember from Walcott is the cello line, and I absolutely love the cello line. Is one of the best string lines in any song in pop music that I've heard generally, and that's what stands out in that song to me. I'll have to listen to it again. I'm trying to remember how the guitar line goes, but the fact that it doesn't stand out, like that, I can't picture it in my head. Um, I don't know.
I guess
That might be the cello is what I'm thinking of. I'm
no,
not a
there's
music
guitar
expert.
in it too. Like you mean that it just is like the
Oh yeah. That's the
Yeah,
one I'm
yeah.
thinking of.
Yeah, I like that. I guess it's like it's simple, but it's catchy.
Yeah, no, and don't get me wrong. There's definitely there's I think there's parts of this album that like there's little bits of guitar here and there. I've written notes on some track, like there's definitely some songs like I do enjoy the guitar line. Cape Cod Kwasa Kwasa. It's got a nice little guitar line, and it's not overpowering, and it just adds to the song really well. But generally, this album as a whole, if you were if you were going to ask me like what parts I think are lacking on the album, I think guitar. There is not a lot of guitar that stands out on this album, personally, compared to
I
the
guess agree to
drums,
disagree. Yeah, it is.
compared to the drums and the keyboard and everything else and the mixing and the lyrics. The one thing that I thought was lacking was guitar. But so I think it's interesting that you
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm
Yeah.
partial to guitar.
Yeah.
But yeah, I liked it. Another thing I really wanted to talk about was because this was, I don't know, I've listened to this album so much that I kind of wasn't expecting to like find anything new. But when I was doing like the deep dive and I was looking at the lyrics and stuff, there's like a story in this album of just this kind of, and it has like it builds and there's like a resolution and stuff too. And I don't know, it's pretty cool where I feel like there's this arching theme of like just frustration with elitism, I guess, and like the system and colonialism and racism, and just it's like building through each song. And then on the second to last track, Walcott, they are like trying to like escape that. And in like the last song, in The Kids Don't Stand a Chance, it's like that one I actually didn't realize what that was about until I was like looking at the lyrics more closely. But it's kind of about like the people from Columbia like leaving and going on to like be like Wall Street tycoons and stuff, and just kind of like perpetuating that like cycle of, what's the word? I guess like
Elitism.
yeah, they go to college and then they get a job on Wall Street and then their kids go to Columbia.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like the inevitability of that. And like there's this theme, like in the first song they're referencing like colonialism, and it's still pervading to this day, I guess.
Sorry, I had to open up a new
I guess it's kind of like depressing because it's like inescapable, but it's acknowledging that. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I actually wrote a really similar note, but kind of a different take on it.
Mhm.
That like one of the things is that Vampire Weekend is like uniquely and like almost paradoxically like unpretentious. Because I guess like indie rock and like indie music as a whole is kind of just full of kind of rich kids. The Strokes are like famously all like, I think, heirs to like some kind of fortune. And now like King Princess is like the heir to the Macy's fortune. And all these people come from like record executives. Vampire Weekend were very upfront that they were like Ivy League New Yorkers. But weirdly enough, like they are not like they don't come from super wealthy backgrounds.
Yeah.
Ezra Koenig is Jewish. Rostam is Persian. One of the drummers is like Hungarian American. None of them are like the Wasp.
Yeah. I was going to mention that like a lot of people, this has been called the whitest album of all time by some people. And it's interesting because none of them are like, Wasp. They're not the white American Protestant.
That's interesting. I didn't know that, and it explains a lot, because something I've read, like I was looking on like Genius Lyrics and stuff, people were pointing out there are like bits in here like an M79, like they're riding the bus, like they're not taking cabs, right? They're looking out the window in the city, which is like alluding to like money problems and stuff, and it's like there. So that makes a lot of sense in that context.
Yeah, all of them went on like scholarships, or they all like took out student loans. During like the production cycle, even after like the huge release, they were still paying off those student loans, which I think Columbia is the most expensive university in the US to go to.
Wow.
So,
interesting.
Yeah, it is now. I don't know what it was like back in 2000 something, whenever they all graduated.
Mm-hmm.
But it's weird because they never like played up their working class, or at least like their middle class kind of roots. They're very much like, yeah, we are Ivy Leaguers, we are coastal elites, as people might say.
Yeah, you never get a sense of like they do a good job of criticizing the elitism of the East Coast of Columbia, of just college in general. There's a lot of problems with that, without like being like without complaining about it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this album is just it's just pointing out like facts, honestly, rather than being like, oh, we have it so much worse than our Colombian colleagues, or something along those lines. Of like, you don't get that sense of like.
Yeah, totally. And like, or I was talking about like the frustration with racism and colonialism stuff. Like, it's very like subdued, I guess. I would say it's there, but it's not like.
It's buried in like 6 metaphors.
Yeah.
That is one thing.
Like the re-listenability of this album is great. I honestly, I didn't think that I was going to find anything new, and I'm glad I went and listened to it like a couple times.
I will say, like, I think the re-listenability, like you said, if you really want to like start diving into its lyrics and really understanding, it's like really good for that. I will say, I feel like I'm so much more immersed in the music, and I have a musical background. I played in orchestra, and like I, you know, have a general sense of music theory, and so I think I'm definitely just more entrapped. I tend to go towards the music whenever I listen to any album,
Mhm.
than the lyrics. But this album in particular, I feel like it almost puts me in a bit of a trance, and I have trouble listening and really breaking down the lyrics in this album. And I don't know if you guys have the same problem, but
Oh, definitely, yeah.
I tend to just tune out the lyrics when I listen to Vampire Weekend.
Yeah.
What's weird is that there's so many metaphors and they're really interesting, and the lyrics are really interesting. And generally, I love, like with other artists like Sufjan Stevens or whoever, I love trying to break down what every single lyric means. But I don't know why. With this album, I struggle with it a bit, and I don't know.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised with God. I mean, this is probably I could probably listen to this album more than most any other album, at least in the last couple of years. And there were still like lyrics that I did not know or have any idea what they were talking about. And I never really thought about it. And I don't know, it was kind of interesting. It's definitely one, it's good, like sit down and like look at the words when you're listening to it if you have the chance. Like it's a different listen. But you also don't like have to because it's its own world sonically and stuff, and you just kind of get wrapped into it. I think that's intentional, and you just kind of get a feeling. There's two ways to listen to it, I guess.
I would say this might be a factor, but Ezra has a very unique voice. And I think his voice almost becomes kind of an instrument of its own on some songs. It becomes way more apparent on the next album, Contra, where he does some really interesting stuff with his voice.
That's
But
interesting. Yeah.
I would also say that some of his lyrics are a little harder to follow if you're just listening, because he can be very laconic. Maybe not laconic's a word, but very vague. There's so much metaphors and name drops. If you don't really know some of those, I think like I've been listening to Vampire Weekend since their 2013 album Modern Vampires of the City came out. So I've been listening to them for almost 10 years, which is kind of wild to say.
Yeah.
I've seen them in concert. I've seen a lot of these songs actually performed in concerts in Cincinnati for their Father the Bride tour. And I think I'm still figuring out new things whenever I listen to these albums. And I think that's why probably they're one of my favorite bands.
Yeah, I think it's almost like I would almost call it like a barrier to entry a bit. And I wonder if that's why, perhaps this album doesn't resonate with people as much as some of their other albums. I don't know, or why it's not as critically acclaimed. I'm not sure.
I have a theory. I think that it very much is like it's a debut album, and with that comes with a lot of like roughness. And I think like for the things people like about Vampire Weekend, other albums kind of do better. I think that Modern Vampires of the City is the best lyrically by far. I think it's the best cohesive like album with a story. The themes are a lot stronger. But if you really like the instrumentation, it's hard to say that Contra isn't like the better album. They do a lot more experimental stuff.
I did go back and look because I was wondering what your guys' takes on. I had never listened to Contra before. I had listened to Modern Vampires of the City, and so I did listen to Contra this week, and I enjoyed it. And I enjoy Modern Vampires of the City, although I think I'd put it behind both Contra and this album. But this album was still my favorite, which is amazing because there's not a ton of bands that their debut album's my favorite album. There's definitely some. I think Arcade Fire is a pretty good example, but
Yeah.
yeah, I thought that was interesting. That this is definitely my favorite Vampire Weekend album, I'd say.
I'm like torn between this one and Modern Vampires of the City, but I think probably this one's ahead.
I'm a big Modern Vampires of the City guy. That might be my favorite album ever, at least one of the top 5.
Yeah,
but like, I also would say this is like a top 20 kind of album for me. But I like this one sonically, I would say a lot more. They're doing a lot more interesting stuff with the instrumentation. I think Modern Vampires of the City is a lot more low key. where this one can be very all over the place, especially on like A-Punk or even like Cape Cod Quaza Quaza. There's really nothing else like it. And especially like their kind of Caribbean like Afro beats that are very heavy on this album. There's nothing like that really on the next three. After Contra, it like drops off almost completely.
Mm-hmm.
So if you really like that, which both of you talked about the drums being good,
Yeah.
I don't know if the other two are like that.
Well, I wanted to get into that because there was some backlash in this album, and that I generally agree with, which is that this album sonically sounds very, very similar to Paul Simon's Graceland. In particular, I think Cape Cod Quassa Quassa could literally be put onto Graceland and I wouldn't notice. And I wonder if that's why they kind of tried to get away from that sound on their next couple of albums, is because of that backlash.
They wrote a whole song about this backlash. Step on Modern Vampires of the City is all about this. The first song is pretty much like, so the first lyric is a reference stripped almost directly from, I can't remember the song. It's Something's of Mischief. And it's like a hip hop song from the 90s. And then they use Pachelbel's Canon in D, which is probably the most sampled song ever.
Yeah, probably.
And all of it is about like how people talking about their music being
Derivative.
What's the word? Derivative. And being like, we don't care. We like our music how it is. Go make your own.
Well,
that's what it is exactly.
It's one of those things where it's like there's no music that's not derivative. Pretty much.
Yes.
You know, there's definitely things like the Beach Boys and things that were groundbreaking that, you know, but nowadays there's very little that's like that amount of groundbreaking that's not derivative in some way. And from that, there haven't been that many people that have like replicated the sound of Graceland and Paul Simon, and or at least not to this extent. And so I still struggle with it a bit because I when I listen to Vampire Weekend, there's a part of me that's just like, God, this sounds so much like Paul Simon. But
I will say
that's not necessarily a bad thing, you know.
Yeah.
And I did see Paul Simon actually commented on this, and he was just like, "Yeah, no, the album sounds great. I don't know, like."
Yeah, he gave him the pass. I was gonna say the same thing. Yeah, and you know, I don't know. I don't have a problem with it, and I think, yeah, they do sound kind of similar, but correct me if I'm wrong. Like, I don't think any of the songs on Graceland have like orchestral parts.
Yeah,
I think that's a huge part of the sound that is different.
Yeah, there's definitely enough different, and it's definitely there's a lot of other influences on this album too, which we can get into next too. But it is in the back. I will say it is in the back of my mind whenever I listen to this, but it's definitely not like. I think they got too much shit for it, but B, it's not as bad as something like, say, like Greta Van Fleet, where it's just like it's literally Led Zeppelin. Like,
yeah, and Paul Simon, he didn't make a lot of it. He's very influenced by like African music and like classical music, so. It's not like Paul Simon made this groundbreaking album and everything about it is derivative. And I would say that, yeah, like kind of the African and Caribbean beats. And like, I would say this album is very much influenced by kind of like 80s, like new wave pop music quite a bit. And, you know, Graceland is an 80s album. So there is that sound there. But there's plenty of other like influences that permutate this album. Like there's a lot of punk influences, a lot of like classical music, a lot of music from around the world. And I think it reaches a point where there's such an amalgamation of influences where it's new, and I think it's even unique now.
Yeah. What are some other artists that you think
Well,
kind of?
yeah, I was about to say they kind of do the hat tip in Cape Cod, Kwassa Kwassa, the Peter Gabriel. There, I read about that like a while ago. And that's kind of cool. Like that's something that they've drawn from. Like if you listen, like In Your Eyes and stuff has like that kind of in the background, like African drums going on, and yeah.
Yeah, I definitely hear a bit of the Strokes in some of the just kind of like how they implement their percussion and some of their not the Afro Caribbean stuff, but the like some of the other tightness on the percussion, repetitive guitar riffs and stuff like that. But it's not overwhelming, not like other bands from that era that's like, damn, that's literally the Strokes, or
Yeah.
what's interesting, so I didn't know this. I saw Vampire Weekend first started touring as a backup act to Dirty Projectors, who's one of my I like that band a lot, and we might see them later on in a later episode. But I don't get a lot. I think lyrically it definitely probably borrows a little bit from it in the tone and the lyrics, but it generally doesn't sound too much like Dirty Projectors. I don't know if you listen to them much, but I went back and listened to one of their albums as well, and I was just to see if there's any parallels. And it's interesting that they really don't. I don't feel like they don't draw from them a lot, but I thought that was interesting that they toured with them though.
Well, not only did they tour, Ezra was a part of Dirty Projectors for a little bit.
Oh,
He
really?
was one of the former band members. They're like they've had kind of like a rotating door lineup.
Yeah.
If you guys are aware of the Shins, they actually toured with them very early on.
Oh, cool.
So small world, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, with songs that sound like other musicians, I think the biggest one is the Ramones on A-Punk.
Yeah.
They're both talking about the same area. The Ramones are from like Staten Island, I believe. Rockaway Beach is on Staten Island. And A-Punk is just talking about like New York City. And I would say it's the band and maybe it's most name droppy. Or it's talking about like Washington Heights and like Sloan Catering. They make a reference to like His Majesty, which is like the name for the New York mayor. All of that. But I just think of the Ramones whenever I think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's I think a lot of that has to do with the punk drums and yeah, there's a lot of different genre influences on this too. Punk definitely being one of them. You hear it in the bass lines as well. Oh, that's one thing we didn't talk about a lot is there's some really good bass lines on this album as well. Cape Cod Kwassa Kwassa,
Yeah.
M79, both of them I think are some of my favorite bass lines. And that's yeah, oh man. Well, and I play bass. I played bass all throughout middle school and high school, and so that always sticks out to me, and that's always something I pay attention to in songs. That, but yeah, I wanted to mention that definitely some great bass lines on this album.
Yeah. Oh, I love that in A-Punk when it's just the bass for a little bit. That's such a fun one to play, that line. Yeah, I think another thing I just love about this album is there's just always something going on. And it doesn't ever stay static. It'll like there'll be like a little bass fill, there'll be like a guitar lick, it'll transfer into like harpsichord or strings or something, and it's just always fresh and new.
Yeah, and they like to add little bits like in Oxford Comma has some of my favorite little added parts. There's just bongos at the end of it. Like the last like 10, 20 seconds, there's just some bongos at the end. And there's a couple of other examples there of just like they just have like a little bit of something kind of at the end of the song, and then it leads nicely into the next song. Almost like it's almost like a teaser sometimes too, for the next song.
Yeah.
How do
All right.
you guys like the flow of this album?
Yeah.
Yeah,
How one
I
song
think
flows
there's like some albums. This is a short album. Let's get this out of the way.
Yeah.
It's only like 30 something minutes, but I would say all 30 of those minutes are used like very well. The
Mm.
lows on the album are not that low. Um, some albums, even like Vampire Weekend, there's some real bad songs in Contra, and Father of the Bride is pretty bad. As like, if I were to list the worst Vampire Weekend songs, they would probably be almost all Father of the Bride. But that's a huge album.
Yeah.
It's like an hour something, but this album's very tight. I think there's like a natural flow. There's not like a reordering I would do. I think there's like the vibe between all of them generally flow very well.
Yeah.
And I think it has the best opening of any Vampire Weekend album. Mansard Roof. I like Horchata quite a bit. Obvious Bicycle. Maybe all of them are good.
So that
But the ending, I do not like. I do not like the ending of this album.
that's why that gets
I
a
didn't until like yesterday when I was looking more deeply at it.
that's what I wanted to get into a bit is I think every song flows really nicely into the next song, but this is like a blessing and a curse for this album is because there are very few albums that the first 6 songs are like just absolute bangers. They're so good. Like the intro, like first 6 songs of this album are so good, and I love them, and they flow great into one another. They have a really good like tempo shifts. You know, it's not too abrupt, to me, then you get to Bryn, and I think the sound just changes, and the like you go when you go straight from I think Campus into Bryn is the only point in this album where I'm like, it just doesn't I don't think it flows well. And I think I know I have a bias against that opening guitar line, in Bryn, but it just kind of hits you out of nowhere. And I couldn't believe this, but Bryn's only 2 minutes and 13 seconds long. And I seriously, if you asked me before we started doing this, I would have guessed that song is like 3.5 minutes long. Because it just, I don't know. And I just, I think from there, the album just drags a little bit. At least for a couple songs. It's hard because I really love Walcott. Walcott's one of my favorite songs in this album. It hits kind of like a punk where it's got that driving like percussion and the great cello line, and I love that song. But I don't know. The album definitely drags a bit once you get towards the back half.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was a missed opportunity to end it on Walcott. Because
Yeah.
I think it was this great ending. And also, like, Walcott is a really interesting song in the history of the band. Because Ezra Koenig, I've talked about him quite a bit, he created a short film. There's a movie called Lost Boys, which is about like vampires. And he was going to recast it in the Northeast. And he created a whole trailer. And the movie was called Vampire Weekend. And then the movie never became a thing, but he wrote the plot into a song, which turned into Walcott. So that's why it has like an actual story. But I think it works really well to end it as like, oh, we're getting out of the Northeast. We're going away from Cape Cod to like other places, Mystic Seaport, New Jersey, all of these different places.
Yeah.
Kids Don't Stand a Chance is an interesting song, I guess, where it is like we're not getting out, we're going to restart the cycle. But I don't know.
I didn't understand it. I would have said like the same thing literally yesterday. Like why didn't you end it with Walcott? But I think thematically, like that's why is like it's inescapable.
Yeah.
And I'd like to point out like a little bit of theory and Walcott at the very end, like the melody does not resolve. You have this like building string line that's like going up and up and up, and then it just ends on, I'm not sure if it's a leading tone, but it's definitely not like the root.
Yeah, I'm not sure what step that is, but yeah, it's definitely not the.
It's got whatever it is, it's probably like the 7 or the 2 in the scale. So but it has that like draw to the, anyway, it's not super important, but
Yeah.
whatever it is, it has that, it's building energy and it's drawing and it wants to resolve to that like root of the scale, and it doesn't, and it just kind of gives, and then it like crashes into Kids Don't Stand a Chance, and it's like, I don't know, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and I like that. I do like it. I think the biggest problem that I have, like I love the keyboard in Kids Don't Stand a Chance, and it's a nice like I like the way that the album ends because of that, the thematic reasoning behind it. So I don't mind that there's a song after Walcott.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Kids Don't Stand a Chance just drags on a little too long, and it's just a little bit too boring. And I understand that that's important thematically. It's just a little too boring.
I wonder
It's
how
a
much
vibe.
of it is like that. I would say, like Bryn, the Kids Don't Stand a Chance, and Blake's Got a New Face. Like they're probably like the lower tier on the album. And how much of that is just because they're like not as good as the other ones, but they're similar enough that it starts to like feel a little old. Like if you didn't have all the other songs, would you like those bottom 3, or is it just in comparison to the rest of the album? Because they all kind of have the string lines and the guitars and the drums and the Afro beat.
I think they're good. I think the whole album's pretty good,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
There's one song I kind of turned on, and that's "I Stand Corrected." It
Mhm.
used to be one of my favorite songs in the album, and then I don't know. I just kind of got like bored of it, and when I was listening to it through this time, I was like, the lyrics are kind of plain. It's a lot more lackluster than the rest of the album. There's a nice cello line on it, but
Yeah.
I don't know. That's one I kind of flipped on. I used to really like it, and now I'm kind of like, yeah.
I've done a ton of flipping over the years too. Like I'll be like, wow, actually this one's really good. I've been sleeping on that song, and then like a new one will be my favorite. I had a hard time picking what my
Let's
favorite was.
let's get into our
Yeah.
next segment here. Does anyone you have anything else to add before we go?
No, I was about to say
I-
the same thing. Yeah.
I have one thing that I don't think
All
we
right.
talked about, and it's how clever some of the lyrics are. I think that's one thing
Yeah.
that on there's a lot more tongue-in-cheek kind of lyrics on this one, and I think like the songs that we talked about are not as tongue-in-cheek or have as great of lines
I
as
think
the other
Oxford
ones.
comma is my favorite lyrically.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think like that's a perfect example
Yeah.
where there's a lot of like, I don't know, who would have put like a Little John reference in like an indie pop song in 2008? I don't know, just love it.
Yeah.
It's probably my
What is the reference?
oh, it's just Little John always tells the truth,
Oh, yeah, okay.
and he always does.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into our recurring segment. Every week, we're gonna bring you the hottest tracks and the coldest tracks, and we're each gonna say our favorite song on the album and our least favorite song, and delve into why. And this is also an opportunity to kind of go in a little more in depth to the specifics of a certain song that we like or dislike and why. So, Nick, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Okay. It was hard. But I decided on Mansard Roof for a couple of reasons. One, I think of all the things that I like about this album, the like bright guitars and the cello lines and the drums and everything and the lyrics, this one has it all. And you know, some of the songs will have like 3 of those, or you know, there are other ones that have all of them, but that's my favorite. And I love, it's just like the best way to start off this album. Like it should be the first track, and it just comes right in. I love that, just the first couple seconds of it, and that first line. I'd love to dive into that a little bit. The I see a mansard roof through the trees, because there's a lot packed into that line. You have like some themes that are going to like run through this entire album. And I had to look up what a mansard roof is, but it is like a style of roof that was really popular. It was like a Baroque French invention, which was also used like throughout Europe, and then in, I think, New England probably too, like over the next couple centuries, and like Victorian era and stuff too. Basically, it's just like it's slanted in a way that you can fit more rooms in the, like within the roof. Like I'm thinking like, I guess it makes me think of like Jane Eyre, whatever. Like you got like the rooms, like the attic or whatever is like up there. So it's a very like European thing, and definitely associated with like upper class, because I mean we're talking like big houses. So you're seeing that like colonial influence. I'm assuming that we're set in like New England, because basically everything is. So you're seeing like the European colonial influence in America that's like still to this day, and you're seeing it through the trees, so it's like slightly obscured, but it's still very present amongst the modern parts of that. And I think that's a really just cool way to start the album, because, and then you also have like the Baroque influence too, which is, this is like Baroque pop, where you're having like harpsichords and stuff. So yes, in a nutshell, yes, this is my favorite, hottest track.
You're gonna go for your worst?
Oh, do I do cold too? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll do that now.
Worst.
All right, coldest track. Blake's Got a New Face, or I guess it's called One, but it should be called Blake's Got a New Face. It's hit like a billion times. Honestly, when I've come around to it a bit, I like it all right now, but I used to find it like unlistenable. I thought it was really annoying. Yeah, I was being hard on it. I've come around, but yeah, that's my least favorite. And it's kind of in a point in the album where it's starting to like slow down. Like Bryn's like okay, and then like Blake's Got a New Face. It's like, nah, it's boring, and it keeps going.
Okay, so my favorite. This is really hard to choose, but I think I'm gonna end up on Oxford comma. I think that it is really encapsulates like the group's kind of ethos. So the inspiration for the song is Ezra was on Facebook, and he saw a Facebook group, and it was Students for the Preservation for the Oxford comma. And he was like, who cares? This is stupid. And that's what inspired the song. It was actually the first song he wrote for this album. And it's kind of like this tongue-in-cheek, making fun of people whose like biggest concerns is like preserving the Oxford comma. Most Americans probably don't even know what it is. And I just think it has a great sound, great music video. It might be one of my favorite music videos ever. Very like Wes Anderson-esque. I think it's got a lot of really fun lyrics besides it. Yeah, I just really like it. I think it's Vampire Weekend at kind of their most irreverent and referential, which are things that I really love about the band. And I agree with Nick. The coldest track on the album, as in the worst, is Blake's Got a New Face. I actually like went through the lyrics as he was talking, because I could not remember what any of the verses were. And then I read through them and I was like, oh yeah, I remember like the one about English breakfast tastes like Darjeeling. And that was the only one I remember. Besides the really obnoxious, like Blake's got a new face in the chorus. It's just that over and over again. I don't dislike it. I don't skip it whenever I'm listening to it, but it's definitely like, I don't pick it out of Spotify and say, I really want to listen to this. But I have listened to like Bryn or I Stand Corrected or like The Kids Don't Stand a Chance on their own. But I'm never going to do it to Blake's Got a New Face. Unless I'm like, wait, what does that sound? What does it even sound like? But that's it. Hottest, Oxford, coldest, Blake's Got a New Face, or one, parentheses, Blake's Got a New Face, in parentheses.
Yeah, I think it's funny you said the music video is like a Wes Anderson film. I haven't seen the music video, but when I was listening to the album, I think I was listening to A-Punk, and I was like, this sounds like it should be in like a Wes Anderson movie. Just something about it's kind of crazy and bright and intelligent. I guess, yeah.
I think A-Punk's in the opening to Step Brothers.
Really?
I think so.
There's a lot of...
the listeners will have to fact check me on that, but I think...
Am I going to be the only one not canceled? Or are you going to be spreading disinformation? That's gonna be a bad show.
I have to look it up.
We got to start like an email so people can email us corrections.
Yeah, it is. It's the opening to Step Brothers.
So we still got two.
Is that a Wes Anderson movie? Oh yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's tough to pick a favorite. A-Punk is a great song. Easily the most famous song on the album, probably. Probably because it was in Step Brothers. Oxford Comma is probably my favorite lyrics on the album for like the reasons Austin said. But I think my hottest track on here is M79, and this might be a little bit of a hot take, but I think the music in it is like the musical aspect of it is the best in the album. It's got the best bass line on the album, except maybe Cape Quassa Quassa. It's close between those two. And then the strings on it are just really pretty. And I just love it. It's like in your face strings, and you don't get that a lot, and I love it. And it really sets tone for like the rest of the album is like, got that chamber music aspect. I shouldn't say sets the tone because it's, it's like the fifth song on here, but, the bridge just goes hard. The bridge on that song, it just slaps. I always find myself kind of bopping to it or jamming to it, like whenever I'm listening to it. And yeah, it's just, I think the biggest thing is like the unique opening on it. I wish there was more strings in current music, and I just really love that. The percussion's great, it's there's so many reasons. My least favorite song, I knew you guys were gonna say Blake Got a New Face, but I have to go with Bryn. I honestly, whenever I listen to this album, I tend to just skip Bryn. I just don't like it. It sounds like bagpipes. I think the guitar line's shit. I don't know. I can't get over it. The only one thing I will say about it is that the drum line is still like impeccable on it. The reason why I'd pick it over Blake's Got a New Face, I feel like Blake's Got a New Face is definitely like there's no way you write that and not realize it's like really annoying. And I feel like it's intentionally annoying. And it actually makes me think a bit whenever I hear it. I don't love it. I don't love it, but I don't skip it as much as Bryn. And I just I don't know. There's something about Bryn, man. I just don't like that song. I think there's in between the really annoying lyrics on Blake's Got a New Face. There's some interesting stuff. I think the lines are interesting, but that's just me. I definitely understand why you guys picked it because God, it is annoying. but I don't think it's more annoying than the guitar line on Bryn, and I think that it's meant to be annoying.
I like the lyrics in Brim. I think some of the verses are pretty underrated. I don't know what some of them mean. So the opening is ion displacement won't work in the basement, especially when I'm not with you. I have no idea what ion displacement is. So I don't know. I just like it. It's very memorable because I think it's Vampire Weekend at its most uncomprehensible, especially for me. Where
Yeah, it reminds me a bit.
Kansas-born Beetle even means, and I've listened to it for years.
I think it kind of hints at like what's to come on Contra a bit. Like it's a little more Contra-esque. It's not quite like the rest of the album in that way, the rest of this album in that way. But like, I also like this album better than Contra, so it makes sense. I don't know.
We'll eventually do Contra and get all our hot takes out.
Yeah.
Episode 75.
Any last thoughts?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, I think that's good. Well, I guess we gotta rank it. It's the best album we've ever done.
Yeah, we
we gotta.
It's first for me right now, personally.
I think it's the worst album we've ever reviewed.
Okay. So then next week, it's my choice for the next episode, my choice is Doolittle by Pixies. So that'll give you guys something to listen over the next couple weeks before the next episode, and I'm excited about it though. So,
Nick, have you listened to it?
Yeah, I've listened to it before. Max has played it for me. The car.
I listened to it once, maybe when I was in middle school.
Well, it'll be interesting then. Thanks for tuning in to Hot Tracks with Cold Liquids. We'll be releasing an episode every few weeks. If you want to be notified, make sure to follow and/or subscribe. And thanks for listening again.